sitting at home, or perhaps at best at your workplace right now, you may ponder over what you're missing not being at this conference in person. Meeting the person sitting next to you, sensing the excitement or perhaps boredom of fellow audience members over the person speaking up front, sharing ideas and impressions in breaks, etc., etc. And even on a daily basis, you may have noticed that brainstorming with a group over Zoom, or even just listening to someone attentively, is more difficult than in person. I think we ought to be grateful that this pandemic did not occur 20 years ago when digital communication was still in its infancy. Nonetheless, it is important to understand what information gets lost in digital space. Drawing on historic and evolutionary insight, I will focus on human participation in communication networks and the transformative power of the collective experience in particular.
Humans are social creatures, which enables them to be super cooperators. It is commonly assumed that language enabled us to cooperate more than any other species and therefore makes us more powerful than any other species. So not being able to gather socially should not be a problem right now. We can still talk, right? What is not so well known, but may become relevant now, preceding the development of language, was an equally unique social trait called muscular bonding. Hunters and gatherers practiced what the historian William McNeil calls moving together in time. Moving together in time is defined as a form of group behavior whereby an indefinite number of individuals start to move their muscles rhythmically, establish a regular beat, and continue doing so for long enough to arouse euphoric excitement by all participants and more faintly by onlookers as well. Muscular bonding expands emotional solidarity, which in turn enhanced hunters and gatherers' ability to cooperate when hunting, which gave them the competitive advantage over other groups that did not practice moving together in time. In other words, moving together in time was a practice that enhanced cooperation and yielded to more success when hunting and thus more efficient food supply. And that, so the theory, is why all human societies dance today and have done so throughout the recorded past. Muscular bonding evolved into various forms of social gathering, such as community dancing, marching, and singing or shouting rhythmically, which are like language, a capability that marks humans off from all other forms of life. These various activities can be classified to serve three purposes: economic, cultural, and spiritual. Let's start with the economic. To coordinate physical labor efforts, for example, imagine moving heavy stones to build monuments, or rowing or harvesting, repetitive work became far easier to bear when done rhythmically, simply by virtue of neurological and emotional responses to rhythmic movement that are built into human nervous systems. Second, the cultural. Here, muscular bonding bound people together through dancing or marching to maintain social cohesion. For example, you can think of the court life of King Louis XIV, military parades, or civil rights marches. Finally, the spiritual. Here, muscular bonding bound people together in belief systems such as religions through rituals. For example, you can think of dancing to appeal to rain gods in Africa, rhythmic moves of Hasidic communities, or the stamping and singing in Christian churches. The art of assembly, as I like to call it, continues to evolve into this day. We assemble for almost every aspect of our complex lives, except for right now. So what I think is relevant to take away from this brief historic excursion when thinking of our situation today is that shared emotion brought about by muscular bonding binds communities more firmly together and makes cooperative efforts, be they of cultural, spiritual, or economic nature, easier to carry through and has spurred social progress. Back in 1995, when digital communication was still in its infancy, McNeil already observed that what makes us human is our participation in communication networks, linguistic primarily, but supplemented digitally at one end of the spectrum and gesturally and emotionally at the other. From this perspective, this pandemic is an interesting experience. If we look at the core of communication being linguistic, and then it has two sides of expansion, digital supplementation works well and has enabled us to continue communicating beyond the distance. But on the other end of the spectrum, the gestural and emotional is missing. This is what gets lost in virtual space. When you look through this lens of muscular bonding, what happened during lockdown is no longer surprising. Having temporarily lost the ability to assemble, we have urgently sought alternative ways to connect. Within a week of Italy's lockdown, videos of neighbors singing and dancing together from their respective balconies went viral, and the trend continued across countries. A few weeks later, people assembled to march for justice. Also, this phenomenon spread from one country, in this case the US, around the world. So when thinking about what aspects of our lives could be moved digitally beyond this pandemic, I think it would be good to keep in mind that shared experience and the muscular and rhythmic dimension of human sociality is a powerful tool in shaping social solidarity and progress.